What if I told you that long before Native American tribes walked the lands of the Americas, another mysterious group of people lived here and then completely vanished without a trace?
Long before the first Native American tribes walked the land, a certain people lived, thrived, and vanished, without leaving a single trace. Now, scientists have uncovered ancient skeletons with genes that don't match anyone alive today. Who were they? Where did they come from? And why did they disappear so completely? Join us as we unravel the DNA mystery that's rewriting everything we thought we knew about the first Americans. DNA Reveal. Scientists have discovered a new group of ancient hunter-gatherers who lived near the land bridge connecting North and South America around 6,000 years ago. Researchers are still mapping out how human populations migrated across the Americas thousands of years back, first reaching North America before heading south. Groups that separated developed their own unique genes, which scientists can use to reconstruct the human family tree. This group, identified through ancient DNA, resided in the high plateaus of what is now Bogota, Colombia, right where the Americas converge. Scientists are uncertain about their exact position in the family tree, since they are not closely related to ancient Native Americans in North America, nor are they connected to ancient or modern South Americans. A recent study of ancient DNA from hunter-gatherers who lived thousands to hundreds of years ago has uncovered a previously unknown genetic lineage of humans from what is now Colombia. This lineage existed near present-day Bogota about 6,000 years ago, but vanished around 4,000 years later, as reported in a study published in the journal Science Advances. These findings may provide insights into significant cultural shifts that took place during that era. It is believed that the first Americans traveled across the Bering Land Bridge from Asia during the last ice age, reaching North America at least 23,000 years ago, based on trackways discovered at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. The timing of the first people's arrival in South America is still a topic of debate, but evidence shows that people were present at the Monteverde II site in Chile as far back as 14,550 years ago. Some of the early indigenous people who arrived in South America made their home in the Altiplano, a plateau close to what is now Bogota. This area experienced various cultural changes during the early and middle Holocene, and researchers were already aware of the emergence of a specific type of ceramic pottery that appeared during the Herrera period, which started around 2,800 years ago. However, the origins of this technology in the region remain a topic of discussion. To explore ancient population movements in the area, researchers analyzed genomes from samples taken from the bones and teeth of 21 skeletons found at 5 archaeological sites in the Altiplano, covering a span of 5,500 years. Among these were 7 genomes from a site called Chequa, which dates back 6,000 years, 9 from the Herrera period around 2,000 years ago, 3 from the Muisca period, with remains dating from 1,200 to 500 years ago, and 2 from Guan populations located north of Bogota about 530 years ago. The genomes from the Chequa site were found to belong to a relatively small group of hunter-gatherers, according to the team's findings. Their DNA does not closely resemble that of indigenous North American groups, nor does it match any ancient or modern populations in Central or South America. However, around 4,000 years later, that population had entirely disappeared. There was no evidence of their DNA in later groups that lived in the area, either. The research indicates that cultural shifts that took place at the beginning of the Herrera period, like the increased use of ceramics, were introduced to the region by migrating groups from Central America to South America sometime between 6,000 and 2,000 years ago. Andrea Casas Vargas, a geneticist at the National University of Colombia, in the statement stated that along with technological advancements like ceramics, the people from this second migration likely also brought the Chibchan languages into what we now know as Colombia. Branches of this language family are still spoken in Central America today. Chibchan speakers were widespread in the Altiplano, when Europeans first arrived, and genetic markers associated with Chibchan language speakers first appeared there 2,000 years ago. The ancestry related to Chibchan may have spread and mixed with other groups several times. The genetic makeup of later Altiplano individuals is more similar to that of pre-Hispanic individuals from Panama than to indigenous Colombians, indicating some mixing in Colombia. Ancient remains found in Venezuela also show some Chibchan-related ancestry, although they are not as closely related to ancient Colombians. This points to the possibility of multiple expansions of the Chibchan language into South America. Future research could include sequencing more ancient genomes from the Altiplano and surrounding areas, as the researchers noted in the study. Such studies might help clarify when Central American populations arrived in the region and how widespread their presence became. But before this lost group vanished, they lived a life far older than farming or pottery, a life built on survival, tracking animals, and gathering wild food. Let's explore the hunter-gatherers who once called this land home. Hunter-gatherers. Evidence indicates that big game hunter-gatherers migrated from Asia, Eurasia, into North America via a land bridge known as Beringia, which was present between 47,000 and 14,000 years ago. Approximately 18,500 to 15,000 years ago, these hunter-gatherers are thought to have tracked herds of now-extinct Pleistocene megafauna along ice-free pathways that connected the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets. Another suggested route is that they traveled either on foot or in primitive boats down the Pacific coast to reach South America. Hunter-gatherers eventually thrived throughout the Americas, mainly in the Great Plains of the United States and Canada, with some groups extending as far east as the Gaspe Peninsula on the Atlantic coast and as far south as Monteverde in Chile. American hunter-gatherers occupied a vast geographical area, leading to various regional lifestyle differences. Nonetheless, all groups shared a similar method of stone tool production, allowing for the identification of knapping styles and advancements. Tools from this early Paleo-Indian period have been discovered across the Americas, used by highly mobile bands of about 25 to 50 members from extended families. During the Archaic period in the Americas, the environment changed, becoming warmer and drier, which led to the extinction of the last megafauna. Most population groups at this time remained highly mobile hunter-gatherers. However, individual groups began to concentrate on locally available resources, prompting archaeologists to recognize a trend of increasing regional generalization, as observed in the Southwest, Arctic, Poverty Point, Dalton, and Plano traditions. These regional adaptations became standard, with a shift away from solely hunting and gathering towards a mixed economy that included small game, fish, seasonal wild vegetables, and cultivated plant foods. Researchers like Kat Anderson argue that the label hunter-gatherer is overly simplistic because it suggests that Native Americans never settled in one area long enough to make an impact on their surroundings. In reality, many of the landscapes we see in the Americas today are a result of how the indigenous peoples managed the land. Anderson focuses on the native Californians and the methods they used to cultivate their environment. These methods included activities like pruning, weeding, sowing, burning, and selective harvesting. Such practices enabled them to sustainably utilize the resources of their environment for centuries. California Indians have a negative perception of the concept of wilderness. They think of wilderness as a sign that humans have lost their understanding of nature and how to nurture it. When the earth reverts to wilderness due to the absence of human connection, the plants and animals tend to withdraw and conceal themselves from people. A hunter-gatherer, also known as a forager, is a person who lives in a community or follows a lifestyle passed down through generations, where most or all of their food comes from foraging. This means they gather food from local natural sources, especially wild edible plants, but also include insects, fungi, honey, bird eggs, or anything else that is safe to eat, as well as hunting game. which involves pursuing, trapping, and killing wild animals, including catching fish. This way of life is common among many vertebrates that eat both plants and animals. Hunter-gatherer societies are different from more settled agricultural societies, which mainly depend on growing crops and raising domesticated animals for food. Although the lines between these two lifestyles are not completely clear, hunting and gathering was the original and most lasting successful way humans adapted to the natural world, making up at least 90% of human history. After agriculture was invented, hunter-gatherers who did not adapt were often pushed out or conquered by farming or pastoralist groups in many regions. In Western Eurasia, it wasn't until around 4000 BC that farming and metalworking societies completely took over from hunter-gatherers. These more advanced societies spread more quickly in areas with fewer forests, forcing hunter-gatherers into thicker woodlands. Only during the Middle to Late Bronze Age and Iron Age were societies able to completely replace hunter-gatherers in their last stronghold, which was in the most densely forested regions. Unlike their Bronze and Iron Age successors, Neolithic societies struggled to settle in dense forests, and Copper Age societies had only limited success. In addition to men, a single study discovered that women participate in hunting in 79% of modern hunter-gatherer societies. However, an attempt to verify this study revealed that several methodological issues skew their results in the same way. Their analysis does not contradict the extensive evidence supporting gendered divisions of labor in foraging societies. Only a handful of current societies of uncontacted people are still recognized as hunter-gatherers, and many enhance their foraging efforts with horticulture or pastoralism. Hunting and gathering was likely the subsistence strategy used by human societies starting around 1.8 million years ago by Homo erectus, and from its emergence about 200,000 years ago by Homo sapiens. Prehistoric hunter-gatherers lived in groups made up of several families, resulting in a population of a few dozen individuals. It remained the sole means of subsistence until the end of the Mesolithic period around 10,000 years ago, and after this, it was gradually replaced with the onset of the Neolithic Revolution. The Malta-Burete people in the Baikal region of Siberia constructed homes from mammoth bones, similar to those found in Upper Paleolithic Western Eurasia. The late Pleistocene saw modern humans spreading out of Africa and the extinction of all other human species. Humans first reached the Australian continent and the Americas, coinciding with the extinction of many large animal species. Major extinctions began in Australia roughly 50,000 years ago, and in the Americas about 15,000 years ago. Ancient North Eurasians lived in the harsh conditions of the mammoth steppes in Siberia and survived by hunting mammoths, bison, and woolly rhinoceroses. The settlement of the Americas started when Paleolithic hunter-gatherers migrated into North America from the North Asian mammoth steppe through the Beringia land bridge. In the 1970s, Louis Binford proposed that early humans got their food mainly through scavenging instead of hunting. During the Lower Paleolithic, these early humans lived in forests and woodlands, which enabled them to gather seafood, eggs, nuts, and fruits, in addition to scavenging. Instead of hunting large animals for meat, they likely relied on the remains of animals that had been killed by predators or had died naturally. Research has shown that the evidence for early human hunting versus scavenging behavior varies depending on the ecological context, including the types of predators present and the surrounding environment. The endurance running hypothesis suggests that long-distance running, as seen in persistence hunting, a method still used by some modern hunter-gatherer groups, was a key evolutionary factor in the development of certain human traits. This idea doesn't necessarily oppose the scavenging hypothesis. Both strategies for obtaining food might have been used one after the other, alternately, or even at the same time. Starting from the shift between the Middle and Upper Paleolithic periods, around 80,000 to 70,000 years ago, some hunter-gatherer groups began to focus on hunting a narrower range of often larger game, and gathering fewer types of food. This specialization also led to the creation of specific tools like fishing nets, hooks, and bone harpoons. The move into the following Neolithic period is mainly marked by the remarkable rise of early agricultural practices. Agriculture began as early as 12,000 years ago in the Middle East and also developed independently in various other regions, including Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. A worldwide map showing the decrease of foraging, fishing, hunting, and gathering across the globe. Forest gardening was also utilized as a food production method in different regions during this time. Many groups maintained their hunter-gatherer lifestyles, although their populations have steadily decreased, partly due to the influence of expanding agricultural and pastoral communities. A lot of them live in developing countries, either in dry areas or tropical forests. Regions that were once accessible to hunter-gatherers have been and still are invaded by agricultural settlements. In the competition for land, hunter-gatherer societies either adopted agricultural practices or relocated to new areas. Additionally, Jared Diamond has pointed out a reduction in the availability of wild foods, especially animal resources. For instance, in North and South America, most large mammal species had become extinct by the end of the Pleistocene. Diamond attributes this to human overexploitation, which is one of several theories proposed for the Quaternary extinction event in that region. A San man in the Kalahari Desert in South Africa. Many San people still live as hunter-gatherers. As the number and size of agricultural societies grew, they spread into lands that were traditionally used by hunter-gatherers. This agriculture-driven expansion resulted in the formation of the first governments in agricultural hubs, such as the Fertile Crescent, ancient India, ancient China, Olmec, sub-Saharan Africa, and Norte Chico. Due to the almost universal dependence on agriculture today, the few remaining hunter-gatherer cultures typically inhabit areas that are not suitable for farming. In the cold, heavily forested areas, edible plants and large game are not as plentiful, prompting hunter-gatherers to seek aquatic resources as an alternative. Those living in colder climates also tend to depend more on stored food compared to those in warmer regions. However, utilizing aquatic resources can be expensive, as it requires boats and fishing gear, which might have limited their extensive use in ancient times. It seems that marine food only started to play a significant role in diets during the Late Stone Age in southern Africa and the Upper Paleolithic period in Europe. Fat plays a crucial role in determining the quality of game for hunter-gatherers, to the extent that lean animals are often viewed as less desirable, or even as food for emergencies. Eating too much lean meat can lead to negative health issues like protein poisoning, and in severe cases, it can be fatal. Moreover, a diet that is high in protein but low in other nutrients forces the body to use protein for energy, which could result in protein deficiency. Lean meat becomes particularly problematic when animals experience a lean season, as they need to break down fat reserves. As one lineage faded into silence, another began to rise. Who were the ancestors of today's Native Americans, and how did they arrive, adapt, and endure? Let's find out. Genetic history of the indigenous people of the Americas. Indigenous American groups trace their roots back to an ancient East Asian ancestry that split from other East Asian populations before the last glacial maximum. They also experienced gene flow from ancient North Eurasians, a unique Paleolithic Siberian group closely related to both European hunter-gatherers and Basal East Asians, such as Tianyuan Man. After around 16,000 years ago, they spread across the Americas, with the exception of the Nadine and Eskimo Aleut-speaking groups, which have some ancestry from Siberian populations that arrived later. Genetic studies comparing indigenous American and Siberian groups support the idea that the founding populations were isolated in Beringia for a long time, and that there was a quicker migration from Siberia into the New World afterward. The diversity of microsatellites and the Y lineage found in South America suggests that some indigenous American groups have been separated since the first settlement of the area. The Nadine, Inuit, and Native Alaskan groups show haplogroup QM242, but they differ from other indigenous Americans due to various mtDNA and eDNA mutations. This indicates that the groups who initially settled in the far northern regions of North America and Greenland came from later migrant populations compared to those who moved further south in the Americas. Linguists and biologists have come to a similar conclusion by analyzing indigenous American language families and the distribution of ABO blood groups. Recent archaeological discoveries in Alaska have revealed the presence of a previously unidentified indigenous American group, which has been academically referred to as ancient Beringians. While most archaeologists agree that the first settlers entered Alaska from Russia via the Bering Strait land bridge, there is an ongoing and heated debate among scholars about whether there was a single founding group or multiple waves of migration. In 2018, the DNA of an indigenous girl, whose remains were discovered at the Upward Sun River Archaeological Site in Alaska in 2013, was sequenced and found not to match the two established branches of indigenous Americans. Instead, it was linked to the early population of ancient Beringians. This discovery is considered the first direct genomic evidence suggesting that there may have been only one migration wave into the Americas, with genetic divergence occurring afterward. The wave of migration is believed to have started around 20,000 years ago. The ancient Beringians are thought to be a shared ancestral group for today's indigenous American populations, which contrasts with earlier studies that indicated modern groups descended from either northern or southern branches. Researchers have also utilized broader genetic data to determine that the division between the northern and southern American branches from the ancient Beringians in Alaska happened only about 17,000 years ago, which further disputes the idea of multiple migration waves occurring during the initial settlement phases. Genetic proof for Paleo-Indigenous Americans includes signs of admixture from archaic Sundadont lineages found in isolated populations in the South American rainforest, as well as in the genetics of the Patagonian and Fuegians. Nomato et al. Suggested that migration into Beringia took place between 40,000 and 30,000 BP, with an earlier migration into the Americas before the last glacial maximum, LGM, followed by the northern population becoming isolated after the ice-free corridor closed. A genetic study from 2016 on indigenous peoples in the Amazon region of Brazil, conducted by Skoglund and Reich, revealed signs of admixture from a different lineage of an otherwise unknown ancient group. This ancient group seems to be connected to today's Australasian peoples, like Aboriginal Australians and Melanesians. This so-called ghost population was identified in speakers of Tupi languages. They tentatively named this ancient group Population Y after Ipiquera, which translates to ancestor in the Tupi language family. A genetic study from 2021 ruled out the idea of a possible Australasian component among indigenous Americans. The signal thought to indicate this hypothetical Australasian component can also be replicated using the basal East Asian Tianyuan man sample, meaning it doesn't actually show a real Australasian affinity. The authors clarified that earlier claims of potential Australasian ancestry were based on a misunderstood genetic echo, which turned out to represent early East Eurasian gene flow, shown by the 40,000 BC Tianyuan sample, into Aboriginal Australians and Papuans, which modern East Asians have lost. Archaeological proof of human presence in the Americas before the last glacial maximum, LGM, was first introduced in the 1970s. A notable example is the Lutzia woman's skull discovered in Brazil. There has been a significant amount of racial mixing that occurred during and after the European colonization of the Americas. In Latin America specifically, considerable racial mixing happened between the indigenous American population, the European-descended colonial population, and the sub-Saharan African populations that were brought in as slaves. Starting around 1700, a specific terminology emerged in Latin America to describe the various combinations of mixed racial descent that resulted from this. Many people who identify as a specific race actually show genetic signs of having multiracial backgrounds. The European takeover of South and Central America started in the late 15th century and was mainly carried out by male soldiers and sailors from Spain and Portugal. These new soldier settlers had children with indigenous American women and later with African slaves. These mixed-race kids were usually labeled as castas by the Spanish and Portuguese colonists. During the 16th century, the North American fur trade brought many European men from France, Ireland, and Great Britain, who ended up marrying indigenous North American women. In the regions where these groups formed communities and created a unique blended culture, their offspring were called métis, or bois brûlés, by the French colonists. In some cases, the English and Scottish colonists referred to these groups as mixed bloods, or country-born. In the United States, Native Americans are recognized based on their citizenship, culture, and family ties rather than race. They have never seen their identity as racial, and historically, Native Americans have often engaged in what society calls interracial marriage, which has influenced ideas about blood quantum. According to the 2010 census in the United States, almost 3 million individuals reported their race as Indigenous American, which includes Alaskan Natives. This information comes from self-identification, since the census does not ask for proof of this identity. A notable trend is the self-identification of Cherokee heritage, which has been referred to as the Cherokee Syndrome. This term describes a situation where some Americans think they have a long-lost Cherokee ancestor, but cannot find any Cherokee or Native American individuals in their family history or among their relatives. This trend of adopting an opportunistic ethnic identity is linked to the prestige that non-natives might associate with having indigenous American ancestry, despite never having faced the related struggles or oppression. In the eastern United States, particularly, there are many pretendians. Certain tribes have set blood quantum standards or require certificates of degree of Indian blood, and they may disenroll members who cannot prove they are the offspring of an enrolled tribal member. In such situations, the tribe might request a paternity test. This has turned into a controversial topic in the politics of Native American reservations. Genetic diversity and the population structure in the American landmass are assessed using autosomal at DNA microsatellite markers that were genotyped. These samples were taken from North, Central, and South America and compared with similar data from other indigenous populations around the globe. The indigenous American groups display lower genetic diversity compared to populations from other continents, with their strongest genetic connections found with Paleo-Siberian peoples. It has been noted that genetic diversity decreases as one moves further away from the Bering Strait, along with a reduction in genetic similarity to Siberian populations from Alaska, which is considered the genetic entry point. Additionally, there is evidence indicating that Western South America has a higher level of genetic diversity and a lower level of population structure compared to Eastern South America. There is also a notable lack of differentiation between Mesoamerican and Andean populations, suggesting that coastal routes, particularly along the Pacific Ocean, were more accessible for migrating groups, which contributed more genetically than inland routes. The overall findings imply that the Americas were settled by a small group of individuals with an effective size of around 70, which expanded significantly over a period of 800 to 1,000 years. Furthermore, the data indicates that there have been genetic exchanges between Asia, the Arctic, and Greenland since the initial settlement of the Americas. A 2012 autosomal genetic study revealed that indigenous Americans originate from at least 3 major waves of migration from northern Asia. Most of their ancestry can be traced back to a single group known as the First Americans, However, the Inuit language speakers from the Arctic have inherited nearly half of their ancestry from a second wave of East Asian migrants, while those who speak Na-Dene languages have about 10% of their ancestry from a third wave. After the initial settlement of the Americas, there was a quick movement southward along the west coast, with minimal gene flow occurring later, particularly in South America. An exception to this trend is the Chibcha speakers in Colombia, who have ancestry from both North and South America. In 2014, scientists sequenced the autosomal DNA of an infant over 12,500 years old from Montana. This DNA was extracted from a skeleton known as Anzic-1, which was found alongside several Clovis artifacts. The comparisons indicated strong genetic links to DNA from Siberian sites, effectively ruling out any close connections to European sources, which is known as the Solutrean hypothesis. Additionally, the DNA showed significant similarities with all current indigenous American populations, suggesting that they all descend from an ancient group that lived in or around Siberia. Linguistic research has supported these genetic findings, showing connections between languages spoken in Siberia and those in the Americas. In 2015, 2 studies on autosomal DNA confirmed that the indigenous peoples of the Americas originated from Siberia. But there was also an ancient sign of shared ancestry with Australasia, which includes the indigenous peoples of Australia, Melanesia, and the Andaman Islands, found among the indigenous peoples of the Amazon region. This sign, sometimes referred to as Population Y, has recently been connected to a very old East Asian population linked to the Tianyuan man, who is an ancestor of modern East Asians. The deep lineages of Tianyuan and East Asians are closely related to the Andamanese and Australasian populations, all of which are branches of the ancient East Eurasians. The major migration from Siberia to the Americas is believed to have occurred around 23,000 years ago. QM242, the mutational name, is the key SNP of haplogroup Q, Y-DNA, which is its phylogenetic name. In Eurasia, haplogroup Q can be found in ancient Afontova Gora specimens and among indigenous Siberian groups like the modern Chukchi and Koryak peoples, as well as some Southeast Asians, including the Dayak people. Notably, 2 groups show high concentrations of the QM242 mutation. The Ket are believed to be the last remaining descendants of ancient wanderers in Siberia. Their population is quite small, with fewer than 1,500 Ket individuals in Russia. The Selkup have a slightly larger population, estimated at around 4,000, twice 150 people. During the Paleo-Indigenous American period, a migration to the Americas took place across the Bering Strait, Beringia, by a small group carrying the QM242 mutation. QM3 is the most common haplotype in the Americas, found in 83% of South American populations, 50% of Na-Dane populations, and around 46% in North American Eskimo Aleut groups. With little back migration of QM3 into Eurasia, this mutation likely developed in East Beringia, particularly in the Seward Peninsula or the western Alaskan interior. The Beringia landmass started to sink, severing land routes. Since the identification of QM3, various subclades of M3 carrying populations have been uncovered. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.